This is Earl Nightingale, speaking to you across the decades, from the crackling radio waves of the 1950s to the glowing screen in your hands today. Before I reveal why 95% of people stay broke, and the one truth that can set you free from their fate, I ask you to take a small but courageous step. If these words stir even a flicker of awakening in your heart, hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and in the comments, share one belief you've held that's kept you from the life you want. Why? Because this moment could be the spark that breaks you free from the cycle of struggle. And I want you to join me on this journey to escape the trap that holds so many back. In the 1950s, I traveled across America, speaking to thousands who dreamed of success. Everywhere I went, I heard the same refrain: I'm trying so hard, Earl, but it's just not working. I saw hardworking men and women pouring their energy into jobs, families, and hopes, yet most remained trapped, financially, emotionally, spiritually. It wasn't a lack of effort or opportunity that held them back. It was something deeper, something most were too afraid to face. After years of listening, observing, and questioning, I uncovered a troubling truth. 95% of people stay broke, not because money is scarce, but because they lack the one thing that creates wealth: knowledge of why they're broke. Stay with me, and I'll show you how to escape the 95% and join the 5% who live free. I was born in 1921 in Long Beach, California, in the shadow of the Great War's aftermath. By the 1930s, the Great Depression had gripped America, turning bustling cities into breadlines and proud families into shadows of themselves. We lived in a tense city, where despair hung heavy, and my mother stitched dresses by lamplight to keep us alive. I saw men in tattered suits, once proud, now humbled by hunger. But amid the ruins, I noticed something extraordinary. A few people rose. A shopkeeper turned a single cart into a thriving store. A neighbor built a small business from nothing but grit. They weren't luckier or smarter. They saw the world differently. This observation followed me into the United States Marines, where I stood on the deck of the USS Arizona during the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, witnessing a world shattered by fire and chaos. I saw men broken by fear and others lifted by resolve, and I began to ask, what separates those who crumble from those who create? After the war, I found my calling behind a microphone in Chicago, broadcasting to a nation rebuilding itself. As a radio host, I studied those who defied hardship, not the elite, but ordinary souls who built extraordinary lives. The factory worker who became an entrepreneur, the teacher who inspired a generation, the dreamer who turned a vision into reality. In 1956, I poured this wisdom into a record called The Strangest Secret, a message that sold over 1 million copies and touched lives across the globe. But the heart of that message wasn't just about success. It was about escaping the trap that keeps 95% of people broke. It's not the economy, the government, or bad luck. It's a state of mind, a way of thinking that locks them in a cycle of struggle. I learned that poverty isn't just a lack of money, it's a lack of understanding. And the key to breaking free lies in one simple, unshakable truth. Here's the truth most dare not face. 95% of people stay broke because they think like the majority. They believe wealth is a matter of chance, a lottery ticket, a stroke of luck. They work hard but think small. They chase stability instead of freedom. They accept limitations instead of questioning them. And most critically, they never ask themselves the one question that could set them free. Why do I think the way I think? The 95% are trapped in a cage of their own making. Not a cage of iron, but a cage of thought. They've inherited beliefs from parents, schools, and society. Money is hard to come by. You're not meant for more. Play it safe. These beliefs aren't just ideas. They're chains, binding them to a life of scarcity. They don't see that their thoughts are the blueprint of their reality, that what they accept in their mind becomes what they experience in their life. The 95% don't lack effort. They lack awareness. They're not powerless. They're asleep. But the 5%, they're awake. They question everything. They understand that wealth isn't about luck or labor alone. It's about thinking differently, acting deliberately, and choosing freedom over fear. They don't wait for the world to change. They change themselves. And that's the secret to escaping the 95%. Let me take you back to the America of the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, a world of grit and possibility, where ordinary people escaped the 95% by changing their minds. In 1947, I met a factory worker named Henry in Ohio. He worked long hours on an assembly line, but he listened to one idea that changed everything. You become what you think about most of the time. He stopped thinking like the 95% who saw only toil and limitation. For 3 years, he thought like an entrepreneur, studying business at night and saving every dime. By 1950, he'd started his own small manufacturing company, employing dozens. Henry didn't change the economy. He changed his thinking, and that changed his life. In 1965, I spoke to a woman named Clara in Memphis. She grew up in poverty, ashamed of her roots, believing she'd never rise above her circumstances. But she heard my radio show and began writing down her dreams every day, refusing to accept the beliefs of the 95%. She told herself, "I'm not my past, I'm my potential." She started a small catering business, focusing on quality and community. By 1972, her business supplied local events, giving her financial freedom and pride. Clara didn't wait for permission. She chose to think differently. In 1959, a mechanic named Walter in Detroit took a chance on himself. He was surrounded by coworkers who thought like the 95%, complaining about low wages and hard times. But Walter began asking, "Why do I accept this?" He spent his evenings learning about car parts, thinking like an inventor. By 1964, he'd patented a tool that improved repairs, launching a business that employed others. Walter's wealth didn't come from a paycheck. It came from a shift in his mind. In 1978, a schoolteacher named Dorothy in rural Nebraska wrote to me. She felt trapped in a modest life, believing wealth was for others. But she started questioning her thoughts, asking, "Why can't I create more?" For 30 days, she thought like a creator, writing educational guides for parents. By 1983, her guides were sold nationwide, supplementing her income and impacting thousands. Dorothy didn't need a new job. She needed a new mindset. In 1968, a young widow named Helen in Chicago heard my message. She worked as a seamstress, barely making ends meet, surrounded by the 95% who accepted struggle. But she began thinking like the 5%, asking, "What can I create?" She designed affordable uniforms for local businesses, focusing on value. By 1975, her small tailoring business supplied factories across the city, giving her stability and purpose. Helen's escape began with a question. In 1982, a bus driver named George in Pittsburgh listened to the strangest secret. He was tired of living paycheck to paycheck, but instead of blaming the system, he asked, "How can I think differently?" He spent his breaks studying real estate, thinking like an investor. By 1987, he owned 2 rental properties, building wealth for his family. George didn't wait for luck. He chose to think like the 5%. And in 1970, a librarian named Margaret in Oregon took my advice to heart. She loved books, but felt her life was small. She began questioning the beliefs that kept her stuck, writing down, "I am a leader." She started a community reading program, thinking like a visionary. By 1976, her program had grown into a statewide initiative, earning her recognition and income. Margaret's wealth wasn't just financial. It was the freedom to live her purpose. These are real people, not legends. They didn't start with privilege or genius. They started by questioning the thoughts that kept them broke. Here's the painful truth. 95% of people will never escape because they don't see the cage they're in. They think poverty is their job, their bills, their circumstances. But it's not. It's their thoughts. They believe wealth is for others, that success is a fluke, that they're powerless. And so they stay broke, not because they lack effort, but because they lack awareness. Their minds are on autopilot, repeating the scripts of the majority. Life is hard. I can't change. This is just how it is. Your thoughts are a magnet, pulling in what you focus on most. If you think like the 95%, focused on scarcity, fear, and limitation, you'll live like the 95%. I've seen brilliant men and women trapped not by their conditions, but by their beliefs. They don't lack ability. They lack the courage to question their own minds. Your life is a mirror, reflecting back the thoughts you hold most often. The tragedy isn't that the world is unfair. It's that so few realize they hold the key to their own freedom. Every great leap in history, the telephone, the airplane, the moon landing, began with someone who thought like the 5%, who questioned the status quo, who refused to accept limitation. But every regret, every unfulfilled dream began with someone who thought like the 95%, who accepted the cage. Your thoughts are not neutral. They're votes for the life you'll live. The question isn't whether you can escape. It's whether you'll choose to think differently today. Do you want to escape the 95%? Don't look for another job, another shortcut, or another excuse. Look in the mirror. Start with yourself. Start with the one rule the 95% ignore. Your thinking is your power. The 5% don't wait for the world to change. They change their minds. They question their beliefs. They choose thoughts of possibility, action, and freedom. They ask, why do I think this way? And how can I think better? This is your challenge. For the next 30 days, think like the 5%. Every morning, ask yourself, what would the person I want to become think today? Write down one thought that lifts you higher. I create value. I am capable. I choose freedom. Repeat it. Live it. Act on it. Stop accepting the beliefs of the 95%. That you're stuck, that wealth is for others, that you're powerless. You're not. You're awake, and that's your greatest asset. This isn't about money alone. It's about freedom. Freedom to live on your terms, to build a life of purpose, to leave the cage behind. The 95% think they're powerless. The 5% know their thoughts are their power. Which will you choose to be? The world doesn't change because the economy shifts or the government acts. The world changes when you change. Your destiny isn't a lottery. It's a formula. Think deliberately. Act purposefully. Choose freedom over fear. When you do, you step out of the 95% and into the 5%. Not because you're luckier, but because you're awake. You're not just living. You're creating. Your life is a canvas, and your thoughts are the brush. The 95% paint with fear, doubt, and limitation, and their lives reflect it. The 5% paint with courage, purpose, and possibility, and their lives shine. You hold the brush right now. What will you paint? These aren't just words. They're a wake-up call. You're not destined to stay broke. You're destined to choose. Choose to think like the 5%. Choose to act like the 5%. Choose to live like the 5%. This is your moment to break free. Not tomorrow, not next year, but today. The cage isn't locked. The key is in your mind. Open it. Step out. Build the life you were born to live. The 95% will stay where they are, but you? You're already moving toward freedom. This is Earl Nightingale, signing off, but not before I leave you with a mission that could change everything. If this truth about escaping the 95% has awakened something in you, a spark of possibility, a glimpse of freedom, don't let it fade. Share this video with one person trapped in the mindset of the 95%, someone ready to think differently. Hit that like button to spread this truth to others searching for it. Subscribe so we can walk this path together day by day as you join the 5%. And in the comments below, tell me, what's the one thought you'll change today to escape the 95%? Your words could inspire someone else to break free, maybe even yourself. This is your moment, my friend. Think it, live it, become it.